Ghana has reportedly turned down a request for a state visit by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, according to Ghanaian officials who spoke to DW. The decision comes remain high over recent xenophobic violence in South Africa. Last week, Ghana raised concerns following the killing of a Ghanaian citizen amid protests on 30th June that called for migrants to leave the country. Sources within the Ghanaian government say the planned visit, which was expected to take place in early August, was declined to avoid possible public backlash and protests in Ghana while emotions around the issue remain strong. But despite the tensions, Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa says relations between the two countries remain strong.
We don't have any diplomatic row between the two countries. The two countries have been good in terms of friendship, in terms of our bilateral transaction, in terms of also our multilateral businesses across board. I think that the government of Ghana had only wanted what it's demanded of every other government across the globe, that you take care of any country's citizens that find themselves in your country. You make sure that we have this, you call it the spirit of Ubuntu, working among all of us. I think at a point we felt that, and rightly so, that there was a bit of a challenge when it came to those things. And I'm sure that the government is doing much to improve upon that. Relationships are top notch. There's no diplomatic row between the two of us. We are only being fair and being that person that is supposed to hold you accountable. I'm sure that if these things were to be happening in Ghana, it would be the same thing. We'll be holding the Ghanaian government accountable. So it's not wrong that we hold the South African government accountable.
Ghana has
All right. Welcome to This Week in Ghana, your twice monthly live stream where we talk about all things Ghana related. As you can see, there was reporting that Ghana rejected a visit from Ramaphosa, the South African president. We're going to talk about sanitation in Ghana, the extradition of an individual from Ghana to the United States, and then a final World Cup follow-up. Before we get into today's stories, we like to do some introductions. So I'll turn it over to my co-host and then I'll introduce myself. Oh, Ivy, I think you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivy Prosper. I am a producer and the founder of my company, Prosper Creative Group. And it is a creative and media company. I tell stories from Africa and stories with the diaspora, and I produce content for other. It's like we were losing the network moment. Okay, we're back. And I am also a YouTube creator. I've got my channel, Ivy Prosper, and I have a consulting service where I consult on people who want information on moving to Ghana, living in Ghana. And I also curate premium tours to Ghana. And I enjoy this bi-weekly live stream that we do, giving top news coming from Ghana and other parts of Africa.
All right, and I am Joe Hatago, founder of Authentic African. We are helping people visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa. We do weekly live streams where we talk about the news of the day so that you're aware of what's happening in the countries you're planning to visit, move, and or invest in. And so with that, we are going to get back to today's stories. As you heard in that earlier video, it had been reported that Ghana had declined a state visit request from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa as anger grows over recent xenophobic violence in South Africa, or Afrophobic is what we like to call it. Despite the decision, Ghana says diplomatic ties between the two countries remain strong. Now, there has been a response from Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. He denies this claim, and he says that he dismisses claims of diplomatic rift between Ghana following the declined visit. So we're going to play a quick video from President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and we will have some commentary on the other side.
Story for today: the South African president has denied reports of a diplomatic fallout with Ghana over claims that the Ghanaian government rejected a proposed visit by the president Cyril Ramaphosa, insisted that no request for a state visit was ever submitted. Now, this clarification follows a report that Ghana has reportedly declined to host President Ramaphosa amid growing diplomatic tensions sparked by recent anti-immigration attacks targeting foreign nationals, including Ghanaians, in South Africa.
All right, so that has been the response from President Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa. And so before we, okay, there we go. Ivy, your thoughts on the reported decline of a state visit and the subsequent response from Cyril Ramaphosa surrounding this whole controversy with the anti-immigrant marches that were happening in South Africa, and obviously some specific attacks on Ghana, and everything that's happened since the June 30th deadline that was given just about 2 weeks ago.
Well, I think that it's, they're trying to be very diplomatic about everything. I don't think that the president of South Africa is going to admit that that would be a reason why Ghana would postpone or halt any visit. Because I know that what I've read in some reports is that Ghana did postpone the visit because of the tensions that have been ongoing between the two countries with the xenophobic behaviors that have been towards other Africans, and specifically with Ghanaians. I know that there have been Ghanaians who have been severely affected by what happened, including one who was killed. So I think that it's only natural that their president is going to say that there's not any tensions, because he wants to remain positive, and I'm sure there are still ongoing investigations into everything that's happening between the two countries, and I can understand why Ghana would make a decision to postpone it. But I mean, I've been reading so many different things that sometimes it's hard to get full clarity on, what's actually going on. Because one thing I know about politics is they don't always let you know everything. They let you know what they feel you need to know. So I think that the concern also from Ghana's side would be that if a visit happened, if the president of South Africa came to Ghana, there could be issues where people who are upset about how Ghanaians are being treated might have backlash. They might have some things that happen, and maybe the president is also taking that into consideration as well.
Absolutely, and I will second that point. Governments will tell you what they think you need to know and what they think you can handle, or what they want you to know, right? And so those are the three different ways information gets released from government officials. And I think everything you said is valid. I'll just add that in this reporting, they did mention that there was potentially fears that there'd be protests and anger and upset by the general population of Ghana by welcoming, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, to Ghana, considering all that's happened. And I will state that officially, for the first time in months, vocally, Cyril Ramaphosa, the week of the supposed deadline for everyone to have to leave South Africa, he did make a public statement denouncing any violence, and but he did also meet with some leaders of the, I guess I'll call it a movement, the movement against migrants, we'll call it. And they were all smiles, and there was a meeting, in an official office meeting with the viral gentleman whose name always escapes me, but he was there, and of course they were in some of their traditional Zulu attire, and I will say that the chief king of Zulu Nation actually denounced it, but there are some people of Zulu descent that are kind of representatives for this movement against migrants. Yeah, I mean, look, I will also say that it probably was a smart move, that if there was potentially a visit meant to happen, it probably makes sense to communicate via the phone first to, see if there's a announcement that can be made that would warrant some type, or like progress towards something that would warrant this kind of discussion. There's investigations happening, and probably once to finish those investigations first, there's a family mourning the loss of a family member. There are other people who are being received in the country, and working through this process that we reported on previously, reintegration, et cetera. There's a lot that's happening based on this fallout. And so I think that it probably makes sense that there's some kind of truth and reconciliation to some degree, right? Before you start having any diplomatic visits that might upset the general population. And I think that that's probably where they are right now. So I'm interested to see, what the plan is moving forward, right? Because from what I understand, there are some people running for office in South Africa who are championing these protests against migrants. And they're running on that platform, from what I've read. There are others, like, of course, Julius Malema, who has condemned these protests. And I do think that, it will be interesting to see how Ramaphosa, for the long term, how he handles this. And I hope that, he finds a way to do the investigation, prosecute those who are responsible, and at least show that he's in solidarity with human life in general, to just ensure that people are, they're prosecuted accordingly if, in fact, it was some of these protesters who had taken the life of that Ghanaian. Okay. I just want to acknowledge a couple of people in the chat. So thanks everyone for joining. And of course, adding some commentary as well. We appreciate you guys. Sometimes the media likes to paint a false narrative. Yes, we just don't know if this one was one of those instances, right? We don't know yet. Maybe we may never know, right? In one of these instances, I don't know if it makes sense for Mahama to explain one way or another, right? But we do know, if I'm Ramaphosa, I would probably say that it didn't happen as well, right? That is a high likelihood. So to Ivy's point earlier. So now let's move on to the next story. I mean, we'll obviously continue to follow this. And I guess one thing I'll mention is, because I don't know how aware everyone who's watching is, there was a June 30th deadline for the original call was for all illegal migrants to leave the country of South Africa. That was the call. As you have seen in viral videos leading up to that date, the determination of who was legal or illegal, people were taking it into their own hands to make that determination, right? So you notice that there were people going up to shop owners and saying, like, show me your papers, and are you a citizen? Do you have the right to have this business? And not going through official channels, but just, doing their own vigilante justice, street justice, etc. That date is now come and past, and there were people camping outside of embassies. Many countries have repatriated citizens and foreign nationals from their countries back into their countries. The number, as far as I understand, has reached the thousands of people who had left the country, and some reports are as high as tens of thousands of people who had left. And so we will see what kind of impact this has on the countries that they've been repatriated to, and also the economy of South Africa, especially the local vendors and those who have left who were employing others, right? Because it wasn't all of those who left that were quote unquote illegal migrants. So we will see what the impact is, and we'll continue to let you guys know. And as it pertains to Ghana in particular, because there were some specific instances with Ghana or Ghanaian nationals, we'll definitely keep you guys posted on all of that. a statement here says, but Ramaphosa's unwillingness to condemn the actions of the anti-migrants is what bothers me. He did eventually condemn it. It was just a couple of days before the deadline, that June 30th arbitrary deadline that was given by those who were protesting. He did make a public statement, but I think many people would agree that, you know, it might have been too little too late, right? But yeah, he did. So moving on, and I guess I will also make it clear that I know a few South Africans who do not agree with this sentiment. Of course, they want to reduce crime. They want to make sure that, you know, there is legal migration to the country. They also understand that it's their government that they want to focus on in terms of policies, et cetera, as it pertains to potential jobs and or business-friendly policies that help to hire locals. And so I think many of those people are pragmatic in that way, but it's almost always going to be a loud minority that goes viral, right? And so that's what we're seeing here. I think there's two things can be true at the same time. There are challenges getting work, maintaining work, and then there also may be, in some people's eyes, a large number of migrants that they feel is unsustainable for the country. And that's just what some people feel. And there are issues with crime, et cetera. I think some of that is misplaced, but you see this in every country around the world. People have issues with migrants in their country. It's almost always the case. It's a similar sentiment, right? Yeah, so I just think what I like is Kenya's model, where they focus on the government and policies and when they're protesting versus the migrants, because Kenya has many migrants as well, right? But a very different approach in that country versus South Africa. Okay, with that, we can move on to the next story. Now, this story is one that I think that I was not as aware of, but was brought to our attention. And that is a gentleman by the name, or he went by the name of Abu Trica, was extradited to the United States in connection with a romance fraud case. And so I think it's an important one to discuss because he was a Ghanaian citizen extradited to the United States. Similarly, this has happened in other cases where you have people who have been accused of a crime that impacts U.S. citizens, but they happen to be in another country. They get extradited to the United States, serve their time, and get deported back to their country of origin after their time has been served. And that is likely the case that is going to be happening here when he goes to trial. But we will play this video on this particular instance, and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Also known as Abu Trica, in court or having been on trial for an 8 million romance scam. We're learning that he has been extradited this morning. So in fact, we're expecting his lawyers to pray for the courts to, as it were, produce him and compel the Attorney General to produce him in court, because they indicated that they were learning that he had been rushed to the police hospital and they didn't like the way he was being treated. Now, officially, they were also supposed to move a motion to, as it were, halt that order that the High Court gave, paving way for Abu Trica to be extradited. Now, this morning, Oliver Bakatbama, the lead counsel for Abu Trica, indicated to the court that he had gotten reports, media reports, essentially, that Abu Trica had this morning, as at 9:16, been extradited to the U.S. to face trial. He indicated that as at 9:16, that was the report that he was getting, but although he cannot independently confirm, he was seeking an order from the High Court for the executive or the Attorney General to provide information on this front, especially citing the fact that the case is still in court. Now,
all right, so I mean, maybe I could give some background before we give some commentary on this, just so everyone's aware of the story. So U.S. federal prosecutors secured an indictment charging his last name is Kumi, with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. As that video stated, it's allegedly $8 million or euros. I think they're conflicting reports on that, as the amount that was defrauded. So authorities allege that Kumi was part of an international criminal network operating since 2023. What they're alleging is that the group used artificial intelligence software to fake online personas on dating websites and social media platforms. That's why it's called a romance scam. So the victims allegedly were elderly Americans gaining their trust before fabricating emergencies, such as travel or medical expenses, to extort money. And so the financial impact reportedly was more than $8 million, which was then routed back to Ghana through a network of co-conspirators, allegedly. So the potential penalty, if convicted on both federal counts, Kumi faces a maximum sentence of up to 20 years in the U.S. federal prison. So in December 2025, Abu Trica was originally arrested in Ghana following a joint investigation with the FBI's Cleveland Division, the Ghanaian Attorney General's Office, and the Economic and Organized Crime Office in Ghana. So in April, he was initially granted 30 million Ghana cedi bail by the High Court in Accra and released after meeting the conditions. And July 2nd, the court dismissed an application from him. And then later he was taken into custody and flown out of Accra International Airport on a Delta Airlines flight on the 9th. They already spoke about the process and some potential controversy surrounding the process of his arrest because of potential illness. But so Ivy, your thoughts on this particular story? I think this is one that it's shocking because of the amount, right? 8 million USD through romance scams. I've heard of romance scams before. I've never seen a number that high. If you know that alleged number, $8 million. But your thoughts on the case in general and the extradition? I think you're on mute. I know there's background noise on your end, so I understand.
Yeah, there's background noise on my end, so I've been muting when I'm not speaking, so my apologies. I think that I'm surprised that you're surprised at the number, because I have heard of, higher numbers for these kinds of romance scams in the past, not necessarily from Ghana, but from other countries. Especially, I guess because in the reports you said that it's unconfirmed whether it was dollars or euros, right? But I do know that I remember, I don't know if people watched that Netflix series that was the Tinder Swindler. Mm-hmm. And that guy, I think he took like $10 million from people through his romance scam. So it's not an unusual thing that we hear about, unfortunately. So I think because Ghana has a treaty between the U.S. that dates back decades, I think it's like since the 60s, Ghana has had an agreement with the U.S. and vice versa to extradite criminals with serious crimes, serious criminal histories. So I think that with the increase of these types of romance scams happening, documentaries being made about these kinds of things, news stories talking about these kinds of things, I think that they're taking it more seriously now. Because people are doing things across borders thinking they can get away with it. I think that's one of the things that people think they can just hide and get away with it. And the thing with him was he was flaunting his money on his social media. I think he had he has, I think, over 100,000 people following him on his social media platforms. So he was flaunting, flashy cars, and people started asking questions about how did he get this kind of money. And so when you're doing that and people are, asking questions, of course, there's going to end up being some kind of investigations, whether it's just people who are snooping around or people telling the police and then next thing you know, one thing leads to another. So, I mean, I think if he did it, then, and he's able to be extradited for it and face the charges, it does teach a lesson to other people who are doing the same kind of things. I mean, there was this thing in Ghana they used to call the Yahoo Boys, they called it the Yahoo Boys because back in the day, Yahoo was a popular email address. So people were using these email scams to try to get money from people. I'm sure a lot of people have gotten those old school, I mean, now they're old school, those emails where they send you saying, I've got this money and you just have to send me this and then I'll release the funds. And, you know, people are not falling for those ones like they used to in the past. So now these new people are being a little bit more sophisticated with how they're trying to scam people. And people are using AI and deep fakes and everything. For those who are watching and maybe you've had somebody communicate with you and you're not sure if they're real, there was a video I saw, independent of this particular person, where the person was pretending to be someone else. And the other person told them that they should do this. They should wave their hand in front of their face, because apparently when they waved their hand, it would break whatever program it is they were using to try to do the deep fake when they were doing the live video.
Right. So
just being cautious about who you're talking to and, paying attention. It's something that people have to really be vigilant about, especially if you're lonely and you meet somebody online and you feel like they're sweet, they're kind and all that kind of stuff. You just never know. So just be careful. But I do think that if he claims he's not guilty, he's saying he's not guilty of it all. Perhaps he's part of a whole, ring of people. Maybe he's saying he's not guilty because maybe he's not the one who's the head of it all. Maybe there's a whole ring of people who are doing this. And so he's claiming not guilty because maybe he wants to rat out whoever it is that's in the top of all of it. But in any case, if he's got any hand in any part of it, then yes, he should be accountable for what he did.
Absolutely. And the reason why I was shocked at the number is because romance scams don't usually get this high. The other kinds of scams do, right? So like to your point, when you defraud, if you like Hush Puppy was doing some romance scams, but most of his defrauding was major defrauding of banks, hospitals, financial institutions, people who would not admit publicly that it happened, right? So like, for example, the Tinder swindler, it was about 250,000 euros. This is $8 million. And
I thought the Tinder swindler was like 10 million. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly.
Well, it was 3 main women and he met them in person. So he was like pulling money directly from them through emergencies.
You got a point about the meeting them in person. You're right about that part, because that he really went all in a different way.
Yeah, and there was somebody else that recently happened to a young Nigerian American woman who was dating what she thought was like a Swedish prince or something to that effect, a European prince, and he did the same thing to her. And so we've seen it definitely in those instances where people are together. What's shocking to me is the scale of this for people who've never met these people, right? It's all been AI, and it's only since 2023. So in 3 years, allegedly $8 million is quite a substantial amount. And it speaks to older, vulnerable Americans, and just people in general around the world. I mean, look, I've done a live stream about this before. There's these WhatsApp things where people impersonate you. They'll join groups that are public groups, and they'll tell you didn't register for that event. They just wait for an event to happen, right? If the group is throwing an event, bringing people together, they're like, you didn't register for the event. Hurry up and register so that you can get on the list. Send you a link to register, and that link now opens your phone up to their phishing scam, and now they can start communicating with all of your contacts and asking them for funds, right? I've seen this happen on a number of occasions, and it's in like these different WhatsApp groups that I was in. I've seen it happen to 3 people now, and in each of those instances, I've had to direct call them and let them know, the WhatsApp is being taken over and everybody's being communicated with to, ask them for financial assistance. But yeah, I think everyone should be vigilant in terms of who's asking them for things. I think one important thing to keep in mind is the sense of urgency that people are approaching you with, you know, and how it's happening, I think is important. When it comes to these romance scams, it's really difficult for people because, you know, you had a television show on MTV for, I don't know, close to 10, 15 years that called Catfish. And what they would do is they would do all these things, reverse image search. They would always say, have you even had a video call with that person? And many times the people would say, no, I never had a video call. Well, in this instance, as you mentioned, we're talking about AI, we're talking about deep fakes. Now you can have a video call with someone, they can change their voice and they can change how they look, and you can think you're talking to that person. I just think with anybody, if you're going to part ways with your cash, be sure you know who it is you're talking to, right? You need to see that person in person and do other research, because even seeing someone in person does not make them a person worthy of parting ways with your cash, right? I mean, but it's difficult. I'm not too sure too many people who are watching this live stream will fall victim to something like this. But if any of you are potentially able to fall victim to this, I just want to make sure that you're aware that these things do happen, and we do want to make sure that you're aware. And then one other thing that I will say is, you know, there are many times where conversations about migrants coming to a country are the ones who are causing all the crime and the fraud and things like that. And I think this is an example of the fact that there are criminals in your own country too. It does happen. And don't always blame the migrants for it. Because there's something I heard on often when I was in certain countries around the continent of Africa, was that it was these migrants from this country that was causing the fraud, etc. This does look like it was a big ring. $8 million is a lot of money. So I do expect that with the feds, he will probably cooperate. I would imagine there will be more people that will be arrested as part of this process. If he's not the ring leader, he was the most, well, not the most, but he was someone that was, as you mentioned, flashy publicly. And as we saw with Hush Puppy, you know, the Nigerian national who is now serving time in federal prison in the United States, they definitely want to make an example out of a person and make sure that people understand that, you know, this can be something that can happen to you if you attempt to do these kinds of things. So we'll follow the story closely and see how much time he ends up getting sentenced for. And, you know, we'll keep you guys posted. But it is really unfortunate that that people are finding this as a means to earn a living, you know, preying on the elderly. I will say one last thing I'll say about this is many times the young boys who they get to help them and assist in this process, the way that they manipulate them is they say that, you know, these people are the people who stole our country from us. You know, it's an empowering moment. They'll say to them, you know, and I've only known this because I've talked to people who have been approached to do this, and they'll say, look, you're not really hurting anybody. These people are rich. You know, it's just was time for us to take back what is ours. Many times that's the communication they have, because most people with the detailed information and understanding this is somebody's grandma or something like that, they may not want to participate. So I do think a lot of the younger guys, the small boys, as they say, that's usually how they describe them, right? Who live in these houses, 6, 7 of them in a house, 3, 4 phones per person, you know, as part of these rings. Many times they're encouraged daily to commit these crimes without really understanding the full impact of what they're doing. And, you know, it's hard to get jobs in many of these places. And so they find that this is the only way to make money. And, you know, they're already given a reason to justify doing what they do. So I do want to make mention of that, because there are many sides to this. And as I stated earlier, 2 things can be true. And I think that's one of the things that we're finding with some of these young guys is that they don't have too many options, and they're being told that this is a way to empower yourself, you know, to take your country back and take control back. So I did want to mention that because I know a lot of people have very harsh things to say about these young boys who are committing these things. And I mean, like the under guys, right? The guys that are, because I would imagine this guy had worked his way up. Generally, you work your way up to you no longer are the one making the calls, right? You're just training the guys to make the calls. So yeah, but anyway, do you have any thoughts in addition to what I just said? I saw you unmute, so I wasn't sure if you had anything else.
No.
Okay.
I don't have anything else to add to it.
Got it. Okay, so we will move on to the next story. So as we spoke about just 2 weeks ago, there was severe flooding in Accra. And part of that discussion in terms of one of the many contributing factors was the challenges with gutters being overflown with garbage, right? And just the sheer disregard for, you know, the gutters that were set up to, you know, kind of take water out to sea. And so one of the solutions that we heard was, you know, working together to tell the government where some of the flooding is happening. And then other solutions that were discussed were cleaning out the gutters, right? And a regular process. And so it seems as though there has been a coordinated effort on National Sanitation Day to do a cleanup exercise. In this particular instance, we're talking about in Tse Addo, the neighborhood in which I used to live for a little over 2 years, where I did witness some of this in the gutters where I lived. So there was an effort to do some cleaning out of the gutters here. So we'll play this video and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
The Ghana National Sanitation Day. I'm taking you to Tse Addo now. My colleague Fatal Bayaga is on standby, but the President of the Republic is also arriving at Tse Addo.
Hello, all of you come. Hello, all of you come to this way. President John Dramani Mahama has arrived here at Tse Addo to participate in the very important national activity, a cleanup exercise following the downpour that submerged parts of Accra on the 29th of July. 13 lives were told officially were lost as far as this flooding situation was concerned. Apart from that, thousands of other people were displaced in the process, and that's exactly the reason why the president has arrived here to, in a way, participate and observe this particular activity here at Tse Addo. Tse Addo, in fact, was among the towns or communities in Accra that were affected by this flooding situation. So you see the president there. You see the president there. The local government minister, the Accra regional minister or Greater Accra regional minister, it's also here to participate in the cleanup exercise. So that's the president. That's the president there, who is inspecting the cleanup exercise here at Tse Addo. And the president is receiving briefing from the municipal chief executive for the Dade Kotopo Municipal Assembly.
All right, I'll leave it there. I mean, this video is quite long, and you guys got the picture there. Ivy, what are your thoughts on this National Sanitation Day and this process to at least clean the gutters and ensure that there's steady flow of water to at least extract some of the water that had been flooding areas?
I think it's a good idea to remind people about National Sanitation Day in Ghana, because back in November of 2014, the government of Ghana had said, and this was under Mahama in 2014. Mahama was president in 2014 and declared November 1st as National Sanitation Day across Ghana. And it was because of the conditions of the gutters and people were getting cholera. There was a cholera outbreak that happened in Ghana as a result. And the history of Cleanup Day in Ghana, I know my mom has talked about that they had cleanups back when she was growing up in Ghana in the 50s and the 60s. So pre-independence and post-independence, Ghana has had these cleanup days, and it's usually localized by local communities and local townships, and they mobilize each other. And it was like once a week they would come together, and then the traditional chiefs of the community will also help with the planning of doing these cleanup days. And then even in the 80s, it also was something that was a thing. Like there would always be times when Ghanaians are doing it, and then people forget, and then something happens, and then people do it again, and then people forget, and something happens, and then they do it again. It's like we have a short-term memory. This has happened now, and so people are, taking the action and being proactive, which I think is great to be proactive. I think it's great to remind everybody to have a national cleanup day, sanitation day, because the other one has been long forgotten. And so, and Zoomlion, which is the biggest waste management company in Ghana, has had, I think they've had a couple of cleanup exercises they try to do. And then right now we have that, organization, the Bus Stop Boys. They have gone and above and beyond cleaning some of the worst places and showing it on their social media, how much is clogging up a lot of the sewage system in the city. So this is one thing that helps to clear up the problem, so that when the heavy rains come, it has water, the water is able to flow. It's part of the solution. It's not the only solution, but it's a major part of the solution. And I'm hoping that this happening now will reawaken people as to why it's important to be proactive and not to wait for it to get clogged. Because the Bus Stop Boys, they clean a place and then they can go back, and that same place they clean has gone right back as if they've never cleaned it in the first place. So somewhere along the line, we need enforcement of keeping places clean. So for example, in Canada, where I grew up, I used to remember seeing signs that would say, "Do not litter here, $500 fine." Do not litter here, $250 fine. There would be signs posted to say, if you litter there, there is a fine, and they take it seriously. If you do it, somebody is going to be fined. There's like green spaces that you're supposed to keep clean, and then having garbage bins around for people to put their garbage in, and people do it. And they don't steal, they're not stealing the bins, which is what's happened in Ghana in the past, people stealing the bins. So there's a lot of indisciplined behavior. And so what we need law enforcement to enforce the laws so that people learn not to do the things that are causing harm to the environment. So overall, I think it's really good to remind people that they need to clean up their environment. And seeing it on a national scale, because I know that there were some businesses that even closed early or didn't open at all on those particular days and have their staff, their team, all actively involved in being a part of the cleanup. Because some of these choke gutters also affect some of the businesses. Like if your business is right there on a street where the gutter is choked and there's a nasty smell in front of your shop, I don't want to go in your shop and have to smell that. I don't want to buy fruit from you and have to smell that. So it affects their businesses too. So I hope that this extreme case of what happened with the flooding, because places that don't normally flooded this time around. And I think that's what's really pushed people to realize how important it is that the human behavior needs to be changed in order for some impact to be made. But at the same time, I think the government needs to take responsibility for the infrastructure things that the average citizen can't. So the average citizen can take control of how they treat the environment by not putting things where they're not supposed to. The government can take responsibility for infrastructure, because me as a citizen, I'm not the person who is digging the sewage. I'm not the person who puts the manhole. I'm not the person who's covering the gutters. That's not my job. But if you are part of the government and you're part of the sanitation, you're part of roads development, when it comes to real estate, even when you're building a building, all of those things should be done better. They need to modernize and create better systems for the sewage. Like I see these shallow gutters being built still. Like meanwhile, in Canada and in the US, you'll have a manhole cover and it's going deep in the ground. So if a heavy rain happens, the likelihood that it's going to flow up is not as high when you have a shallow thing like this versus having something that's like, 20 feet deep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, one of the other things that I think is a deterrent, but isn't consistent, is covering the gutters, right? So when the gutters are covered, it's a lot harder to throw garbage inside of it, right? And I noticed that in some areas, especially like cantonments and other areas, those gutters are perfectly covered. Very difficult to throw garbage in those gutters. So I think that's one thing that I think could even be an initial solution, because other countries have the same challenge and they don't cover their gutters, and so I've seen the same challenge in other countries in West Africa. And then the other thing, to the point that you mentioned around restaurants, many restaurants are like roadside street vendors, and every street really has a gutter in front of it, and so there's all kinds of things that you're thinking about when you're stopping by to eat, and there's a gutter that's full up, and you see flies flying over to the food and flying back in, and cholera there was a cholera outbreak at one point. I mean, this is the reason for this. So I'm happy to see that something is being done. As you mentioned, I think enforcement is really important, and I hope that they continue to do it. I hope that they also have other solutions in place for the gutters that are uncovered to cover those. There probably should be a budget put together for that. Potentially digging deeper gutters, I think, would also maybe be important. I think better planning around ensuring that the gutters actually have a pathway to, that slope a little bit, that have a pathway out. And then, but I think enforcement is going to be the major thing. To your point, maybe that means putting garbage bins on all the major street corners and, nailing them down. I don't know if you can nail them down, but chain them as they do sometimes in New York City. And so that
when chain them here, and people cut the chain and steal it.
Okay, so maybe that won't help. But yeah, I mean, there has to be a solution, and I don't know what that looks like, but some solution to this challenge. I think enforcing it with fines. I mean, nobody wants to come out of pocket to pay a fine.
Yeah.
That would also mean there needs to be enforcement, but having a fine and having enforcement, I think, will help to solve this a bit. But I think it's going to have to be cultural changes that happen over time. People just seeing that it's important to take care of their locations. But I will say, not having waste bins on any, like, within sight, right? People walk around a lot of places in Ghana, right? People are walking, and you notice that people walk a lot. Like, that people walk a lot when you ask for directions somewhere and somebody's like, oh, it's just down there. And you've been walking 15 minutes and you're like halfway to the location. That's how people walk all the time. And you'll understand what I mean when you're in Ghana. But I can't tell you how many places I've walked that I realized that when they said it's just down there, it's because they're used to walking 10 miles. And I was like, okay, I should have known. But imagine, you drank some water in a water bottle or something, and for a mile you walk, you don't see anywhere to throw it away.
Yeah,
that's a problem. I mean, so there's also a need for a place to dispose of this stuff. People are not going to carry it all the way to their next destination. It's unrealistic to expect that too. And so I do think that there needs to be some kind of solution for trash cans in certain areas, so that some people can, be able to throw things away that they're walking with. Because that's a big part of it. I mean, I've said to someone, pick it up, and they're like, okay, where should I throw it away then? Fair. I don't know. You have to walk into a business somewhere to throw it away, because there's nowhere to throw it away nearby, right? So I do also understand that too. So yeah, I do want to mention that, because I think that there's a level of understanding too that I do have for those who are walking long distances, drinking a plastic water, or whatever it is, and not having anywhere to dispose of it. Okay. So with that, and we'll continue to watch this, right, and see what happens. If obviously the rainy season still is going, and so we'll see if there are any changes to, if this has any impact, I should say, and then what the long-term strategy is going to be. I guess one thing I did want to ask you, Ivy, and I don't know if you've heard about this. Are you back in Ghana as of yet? I can't remember if you were back yet.
Wednesday.
Okay. I haven't asked this as of yet. I lived in Chado, but I know that we had floods when the rainy seasons weren't that bad. And the building that I lived in, the first floor, that was always an issue. Like I remember coming outside, it was like one day of rain, and it was not terrible, but it was enough where, you know, we had our gate guy like using a broom to try to push water out of the compound, and the compound was sloped inwards. So water just kind of came in. So he's like pushing water up a hill to get it out of the compound. Those who lived on the fourth floor, it ended up going into their apartments. I'm now I have to check because I don't know what's happened for them. But do you know if what the situation is on the ground? And I don't know if you. I'm asking you, you know, without knowing the answer to this. But have we heard, you know, what the reprieve has been at like Circle and all these places? Because, you know, that water was pretty high up. Has anything even happened? Do we know? And maybe I could do a search for that too. But I wonder what has happened since. And this is something we should be presenting to people. So I should have looked this up. Now I'm asking the interweb.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, that area gets flooding all the time. It's one of the reasons why I don't even like buying stuff from there, because that area is prone to flooding. And I just know that there are vendors who will have things that were soaked in nasty water, and they're just dry it out and they're going to sell it. It's one of the reasons why I don't like going to Circle for some of the things. But they have repeatedly had problems with water submerging some of their vendors, and then they have electrocution and fire outbreak issues because you have sparks that happen when there's water and there's electrical wires. Because you know how in Ghana, some of these roadside shops, some of these market shops, the electrical wiring to their shop is not done properly, and sometimes it's exposed. And so if you have rain happening and then someone's got electrical stuff going, you hear stories about these electrical shocks that happen and then cause fires. That's why in Ghana, sometimes when it rains, you always find that sometimes when it rains, your power goes out. And that's because ECG, the electric company of Ghana, intentionally turns off people's electricity sometimes when they see that the rainstorm is very bad, to avoid any potential electrocutions that could happen in some areas that could get a little bit of flooding happening. But I don't know the situation right now on the ground. I do know that I know people who were severely affected by the flooding, and their homes were submerged, their properties were submerged. The water has receded. And so when it's receded, all of their things are damaged. So there's a designer I know who his entire operation has been completely destroyed. So he had a lot of sewing machines and, you know, and they got submerged in water because the water went up to their neck. And so all of the machines are damaged. Then also all of the products that he was working on for clients. So, you know, he makes like clothing, he makes ties, he makes a bunch of different clothes for people. And then the fabrics that he had in the storage area, all of it is damaged because they all got submerged in that mucky brown water. And when you look at it, you know that that's toilet water. It's with sewage water. It's all the dirt, everything is all mixed up in there. So you don't want to use those products again. All those clothes that he was making for clients, he can't sell those because it's damaged. Right. So I know people like him who were severely affected. The water is subsided, but the damage has been done to all of their products and to their property. So there's a lot of them that the walls have soaked in the water. So I'm sure there could be potential mold issues that some people might face in their homes. They're going to have to do some serious cleaning of the walls, maybe even gutting out parts of the wall to replaster it because of the damage that's been done.
Yeah, and to give everyone some context, there apparently just in a single day, 140 millimeters of rain, which is equal to 5.5 inches for those who don't use the metric system. And as that video stated, it resulted in at least 13 people losing their life several missing, displaced over 38,000 people, and at least 7,700 households were affected. So we're talking about major damage and long-term damage to everything Ivy just said. Even once the rain subsided, the water subsided, the next issue is now mold. And I will tell you that's not something that it's not at the same level as you might find somewhere like in certain states here in the United States where there's a lot of rain, where you have like mold companies that come in and they do all the things they need to do. And so to prepare for this is people generally repaint over walls, right? That's what I've seen. People try to wash it off and then paint over it because it kind of turns the walls black. But that doesn't really solve the issue. It just is aesthetically better. There are sanitation companies though that I have seen that have gone viral now because they're going and cleaning up certain places. I've seen some videos. So in any case, we will keep you guys posted on how this continues to impact Ghana. Just make sure, as we said before, if you're planning to visit, move, or invest in housing in Ghana, you are in Ghana during the rainy season, so you can determine what it would look like for you during that period of time. I know we're at time now. I know you have to go. I have to go as well. So we want to thank you guys all for watching. Make sure you follow us across all platforms, subscribe on YouTube, and we will be back in a couple weeks. Any final words before we go?
Thank you all for being here, and make sure you stay tuned to all the news coming from Ghana and the rest of the African continent. Follow me on all social platforms at Ivy Prosper, and my book is called Your Essential Guide on Moving to Ghana. And then, of course, I have consultations on Ghana. And follow my YouTube channel. It's very easy to just hit the subscribe button and to share and like videos that you feel are useful to you and to other people as well. Thank you so much.
There it is. Thank you guys all for watching. Oh, and if you, I know it's kind of a strange transition, but I do have a contest for people who want to go to Ghana. So you can go to ito.authenticafrican.com and you'll see all the details there. So with that, thanks for watching. See you all on the next video. Bye, guys.